Hello dear students, welcome to physics class of P1. We have been discussing about the chapter laws of motion. In this chapter, the previous class, we have discussed about what is friction. The friction is a self-adjusting force. What is the cause for the origin of friction? The different types of friction such as static friction, limiting friction and kinetic friction, and we have represented graphically the variation of friction versus the applied force, and also we have discussed about the laws of friction. The next point in the chapter we have to discuss is friction is necessary evil. Friction is a necessary evil. That means necessary means it has a good thing, evil means it has also a certain bad thing. The friction is a necessary evil. This is because the friction has both advantages and disadvantages. So, in other words, what we can say, friction is not desirable, but without friction, we cannot think of our survival. Right? So, for this, now we have to discuss here. That means it has a certain good things and bad things also. Let us see what are the advantages of friction and what are the disadvantages of friction, and after that we have to discuss what are the methods of reducing the friction. First one, let us see about the advantages. The first one, the friction helps for walking. The first one, what? The friction helps for what? Walking purpose. The force of friction helps us to move on the surface of the earth. So, in the absence of friction, we cannot think of walking on the surface. That is why what happens? We fall down while moving on a smooth surfaces. Right? So, the friction has advantages. It helps for what? Walking. And the second one, writing on a paper. How it helps? The force of friction between the tip of a pen and the surface of a paper helps us to write on the paper. Right? It is also very important. The writing is also important. The force of friction between the tip of a pen and the surface of paper helps us to write on the paper. Next one, stopping. Right? To stop or to start the vehicle. In stopping, what happens? The force of friction between the tires of a vehicle and the road helps us the vehicles to stop. So when the brake is applied, what happens? The force of friction between the tires of a vehicle and the road helps us to stop the vehicle. That means what? The brakes of vehicles work on account of the friction. So friction helps us to stop the vehicles. Also it helps for what? The holding the object. Right? So when the object surface is oily, we cannot hold it rightly. Right? So because of the friction we can hold the object. The friction between our hand and the object helps to what? Hold the object. So on smooth surface we cannot hold the objects easily. So this is also very important, that the friction is necessary. Next one is what? Lightening the matchstick. A matchstick is lightened because of friction. A matchstick is lightened because of friction. So this is also very necessary. Next one, for writing. Right? For writing, how it helps? So for writing, the force of friction between the chalk and the blackboard helps us to write on the board. Right? So it is a very important point that the friction between the chalk and the blackboard helps us to write on the board. So in this way, now we can summarize here all the necessary or the advantages of friction or the benefits of friction. It helps us for what? Walking. It helps us to hold the things, to stop the moving object. Right? It helps to stop the vehicle or to start the vehicle. It helps for what? Grinding, right? It helps in construction purposes. It helps to write with pen or pencil on a paper. It is possible because of the friction. And also the tires of a vehicles are made rough to increase the friction. And it helps for what? For mastic ignition is possible because of the friction, right? So in this way, these are the important advantages of the friction. Again, you can list out the many advantages of the friction, as you know, right? These are the some benefits of the friction or the advantages of friction. So that's why it is necessary for us, right? Now, friction as an evil, that means what are the bad things or what are the disadvantages of friction, right? So first one, the friction as an evil. The friction brings about wear and tear in moving bodies. So what happens in the first thing, there is the force of friction causes a lot of wear and tear in the moving parts of the machine, right? Wear and tear takes place in the moving parts of the machine, right? And it produces heat, and it produces what? Heat, and slow down moving bodies, right? So when a significant amount of energy of a moving object is wasted in the form of heat energy to overcome the force of friction. So in a moving object or the moving bodies, what happens? The To overcome the friction, the amount of energy to overcome the force of friction, what happens? The amount of energy of a moving object is wasted in the form of heat energy. So this is the disadvantage of this is one of the disadvantage of what? The friction, right? First one, what? Wear and tear takes place, right? The energy of the moving body is wasted in the form of heat to overcome the friction, right? And the force of friction restrict the speed of the moving vehicles. Speed and restrict up to the, because of what? The force of friction restrict the speed of the moving vehicles like buses, trains, aeroplanes and rockets, etc. So sometimes what happens? A machine gets burnt due to the force of friction between the different moving parts. Sometimes what happens? A machine gets burnt due to the force of friction between the different moving parts, right? Now, with the discussion of what the advantages and disadvantages, we can say here the statement that the friction is a necessary evil. In spite of what? Various disadvantages of the friction, it is a very difficult to part with it. So friction is a necessary evil, right? Disadvantages of friction are what? Soles wear out, tires wearing out, stone steps wear out, brake pad wearing out, slow down the speed, friction causes heat. So with all these advantages and disadvantages, what we can give the statement here is the it is very difficult to part with it. That means what? The friction is a necessary evil. It has a certain good things, it has a certain bad things, but we cannot think of our survival without a friction, right? So now, with all these discussion advantages and disadvantages, now let us see what are the important methods. By using the important methods, how we can reduce the friction, right? How we can reduce the friction. Now let us discuss it. So then, what are the important methods of reducing the friction? As the friction causes the wastage of energy, so it becomes necessary to reduce the friction, right? It is necessary to reduce the friction. So therefore, now let us discuss here some of the important methods to reduce the friction. First one, by polishing and making the surface smooth, right? By polishing and making the surface smooth. We know that the friction between the rough surfaces is much more than between the polished surfaces, right? So we polish the surface to reduce the friction. By making the surface in contact highly polished and smooth, the bumps and depressions get minimized, and so friction is reduced. So by making the surface smooth and polished, we can reduce the friction. And also by using the lubricants, right, by using the lubricants we can reduce the friction here. To reduce the friction, lubricants like oil and grease are used. When the oil or grease is put in between the two surfaces, the irregularities remain apart and do not interlock tightly. Thus, the surface can move over each other with less friction between them. Right? By using the lubricants like oil, grease, etc., between the moving parts of the machine, we can reduce the friction. Now, again, one more important method is what, the by using the ball bearings, right, by using the ball bearings we can reduce the friction here. A ball bearing consists of what, two coaxial cylinder between which the steel balls are placed. The inner cylinder is fitted on the axle and the outer cylinder is fitted to the wheel. When the axle rotates in clockwise direction, the steel balls rotate in anti-clockwise direction, makes the outer cylinder and the wheel to rotate in anti-clockwise direction. So as the sliding friction between the cylinder gets converted into what, rolling friction, so friction is reduced. So when we convert sliding friction into rolling friction, we can reduce the we can minimize the friction here. So by converting using the ball bearings, we can by using the ball bearings we have converted here the sliding friction into rolling friction, so that the friction is reduced here, right? So again by adding the wheels we can reduce the friction. That means what, we have to convert sliding friction into uh, rolling friction. So all these are summarized here. To reduce the friction, right, reduce the contact area by using ball bearings or wheels, change the surface of the material that are touching by using lubricants like oil and grease. Then we have to convert sliding friction into rolling friction. So by all these methods we can reduce the friction. So again you can list out some other methods which are known by you, important methods used for what, to reduce the friction. So this is all things, this is all about what are the important advantages of the friction, what are the disadvantages. That means friction is necessary evil. So to overcome the disadvantages of the friction, we are using some important methods for reducing the friction. So those are what, polishing the surface and making the surface smooth, using the lubricants, by using the ball bearings. So all these are the important methods of reducing the friction. Now the next point we have to discuss here is about the dynamics of circular motion. Let us discuss about the dynamics of circular motion. The next point we have to discuss again here about the centripetal force. So already we have discussed about the centripetal acceleration. What is circular motion? The motion of an object along the circular path, that is called as the circular motion. So when a body is in circular motion, the centripetal acceleration is acting on it. That means what? The the radial acceleration acting on the body towards the center and along the radius, that is called as the centripetal acceleration, right? So in a circular motion, the direction of motion of an object is denoted by, or it is determined by what, the tangent drawn at that point, right? In a circular motion, the direction of motion of an object is what, the tangent drawn at that point represents the direction of motion. So that means what happens in case of circular motion, in case of circular motion, the direction of the object which is moving in a circular path which changes continuously. The direction of motion of a body in circular motion changes continuously due to the change in direction of the motion of the body. right? Due to the change in direction of motion of the body, there is an acceleration, right? Whenever if the magnitude of the speed changes, there is an acceleration. If the direction of the motion of the object changes, then also you will get the acceleration, right? In case of circular motion, in case of uniform circular motion, the object is moving with a constant speed, but the direction of motion, that is the direction of motion of the object changes continuously in case of circular motion. Therefore, change in the direction, there is a change in velocity, hence you will get the acceleration, and this acceleration is called as the centripetal acceleration, right? This acceleration is called as the centripetal acceleration. Already we have derived the expression for the centripetal acceleration also, that is AC, that is centripetal acceleration is equal to v square divided by r, right? Where v is the velocity of the object and r is the radius of the circular path, right? The radius of the circular path is r and v is the velocity of the object, right? So what is meant by the centripetal force then? The force acting on the body in case of circular motion, that is called as the centripetal force, and we can define it as what? The force which deviates a moving body from its linear path to move along its circular path, right? The force which makes a body, right, which makes a body to move from its linear path to move along a circular path. The linear path ಹೋಗುವಂತ object ಅನ್ನ circular path ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಯಾವ ಫೋರ್ಸ್ ಬೇಕ್ರಿ? That is the centripetal force is required, right? It is directed towards the center of circular path, is called as the centripetal force. Let us see it once again. The force which deviates a moving body, right? Moving body na deviate ಮಾಡ್ತೈತಿ. ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ linear ಆಗಿ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅದನ್ನ circular ಆಗಿ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. We have to make it what? A circular path move ಆಗೋ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಯಾವ ಫೋರ್ಸ್ ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ ನಮಗೆ? We require a centripetal force, right? The force which makes a body to move it from linear path to move along a circular path, and it is directed towards the center of circular path. ಅದು ಯಾವ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಒಳಗೆ ಇರ್ತೈತೆ centripetal force? It is towards the center of the circular path and along the radius. The radius towards the center of the circular path. This force is called as the centripetal force. For example, if a particle of mass m, now this is the expression for the centripetal acceleration. Suppose if a body of mass m, which is moving in a circular path, right? M is the mass of the body. If m is the mass of the body, and r is the radius of the circular path, circular path. If r is the radius of the circular path, a body of mass m which is moving in a circular path of radius r, then how we can write the expression for the centripetal force, right? The centripetal acceleration is equal to v square divided by r. Then the expression for the centripetal force, the direction of the centripetal force is same as that of the direction of the centripetal acceleration. So according to Newton's second law of motion, what we can write? The centripetal force we can write here. According to Newton's second law of motion, what we can write? F is equal to m into a. So in this expression A, we have to write as centripetal acceleration and F is equal to centripetal force. So Fc is equal to m into A, or F is equal to centripetal force is equal to m into v square divided by r. So this is the expression for the centripetal force, a force which deviates a moving body from its linear path to move it along a circular path, and it is the force is directed towards the center of the circular path, is called as the centripetal force. The examples for the centripetal force, can give many examples for the centripetal force. So you have to remember this. This is a very important expression. Right now, I can give you many examples for the centripetal force, which makes a body to move along a circular path. For example, you all know that if you are considering the structure of atom, right? The electrons are moving around the nucleus in a circular path, right? So in case of what happens, there is in a circular motion of electrons, right? There is a positively charged nucleus is present at the center of the atom, right? And the electrons, negatively charged electrons, are revolving around the nucleus in a circular path. So in this case also, the direction of motion of the electron changes at every point, right? Now it is moving with a velocity v. Mass of the electron is m. Then the centripetal force, that can be written as what here, Fc is equal to m v square divided by r, which is acting on the electron, which is moving in a circular path around the nucleus. Here also, the necessary centripetal force required for an electron to revolve around the nucleus in a circular path, it is what? The electrostatic force of attraction between the positively charged nucleus and a negatively charged electron, which provides the necessary centripetal force which is required to move a electron along the circular path. ಇಲ್ಲಿ electron circular path ಮೂವ್ ಆಗಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ centripetal force ಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಆ centripetal force ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಸಿಗ್ತೈತ್ರಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ? That is the electrostatic force of attraction. Electrostatic force of attraction between the electron and the positively charged nucleus. Electrostatic force of attraction ಏನಿರ್ತೈತ್ರಿ, ಅದು centripetal force ಅನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊವೈಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೈತಿ. That is required to move electron along the circular path. Again, one more example is what? One more example for the centripetal force is what? For the revolution of Earth around the Sun, right? The necessary centripetal force is provided by the gravitational force. The gravitational pull and the curvature, right? The gravitational force, right, which provides the necessary centripetal force required for the revolution of the Earth around the Sun. The Earth is revolving around the Sun, right? The necessary centripetal force is provided by the gravitational force, right? In this way, the centripetal force is required for the circular motion. The force which deviates a moving body from its linear path to move along the circular path, that force is called as the gravitational force, and that force is towards the center of the circular path and along the radius. So for the revolution of the electrons around the nucleus in a circular path, which force provides the centripetal force? That is the electrostatic force of attraction between the positively charged nucleus and negatively charged electron. And here in case of the Earth the revolution of the Earth around the Sun, so in that case the gravitational pull or the gravitational force provides the necessary centripetal force. So this is about and again we can give one more example for the centripetal force. A vehicle takes a run, right? During the movement of the vehicle, when vehicle takes the turn means, right, it takes a curved path means there is a circular motion. So in that case also what happens, the necessary centripetal force is provided by the friction between the tires and the road. The friction between the tires and the road provides the necessary centripetal force to move it in the circular path. So in this way, for circular motion, the centripetal force is very, very necessary. The force which deviates a moving body from its linear path to move it along a circular path is called as the centripetal force, and this force acts towards the center of a circular path is called as the centripetal force. So this is about the dynamics of the circular motion and about the centripetal force, right? Now in the next video class we will discuss about the next point related to the chapter. Okay, thank you so much.